Everyone pitied the mountain man's wife, until they learned why she chose him. The first thing people noticed about Elias Crow was his silence. He lived high above the valley, where the mountains folded into one another like old scars, in a cabin built from pine logs and stubbornness. He came down to town only once every few months, usually to trade pelts, buy flour, salt, and lamp oil. He spoke little, kept his eyes low, and left before anyone could ask questions. So when word spread that Elias Crow had taken a wife, the valley buzzed like a kicked beehive. Her name was Mara. She was young, people said. Too young to be buried alive in those mountains. They whispered that she must be desperate, or foolish, or trapped by some dark promise. When Mara came to town with Elias for the first time, women paused mid-sentence, men watched from doorways, and pity settled over her like an unwanted shawl. Such a shame, they murmured. Pretty girl, wasting her life. She'll learn soon enough. Mara heard it all. She always did. She walked beside Elias with her head high, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He wore the same worn coat, the same weather-beaten hat, his beard streaked with gray long before its time. He never corrected anyone, never defended himself. He simply paid for their supplies, nodded once, and turned back toward the mountain trail. Life in the cabin was hard, as everyone expected. Winter came early and stayed late. Snow piled high against the door. Wind howled through the trees like something alive and angry. Mara chopped wood until her hands blistered, learned to dry meat, mend boots, and read the sky for storms. Some nights, she cried quietly into her blanket so Elias wouldn't hear. But she never regretted her choice. Because people in the valley had never known Elias Crow before the fire. Years ago, before he became the mountain man, Elias had lived in the valley like everyone else. He had a small house, a good horse, and a wife named Ellen. She laughed easily and sang while she worked. One winter night, a fire tore through their home while Elias was out searching for a neighbor's lost cattle. By the time he returned, it was too late. The valley mourned for a week. Then they moved on. Elias never did. He took what little he had left and vanished into the mountains. There, among the silence and the cold, he learned how to survive alone. And more than that, he learned how to carry grief without letting it turn into cruelty. Mara met him years later, when she herself was running. Her father had planned her life down to the last breath, who she would marry, where she would live, what kind of woman she would be. When she refused, his anger was sharp and final. One night, with nothing but a pack and a shaking heart, she fled into the mountains, not knowing where she was going, only knowing she couldn't stay. A storm found her before shelter did. By the time Elias discovered her, half buried in snow near a frozen stream, her lips were blue and her pulse faint. He carried her for miles through the storm, his legs burning, his lungs screaming. He nearly collapsed at his own door but refused to let go until she was safe inside. For days, she drifted in and out of fever. Elias fed her broth, changed cold cloths, spoke to her in a low, steady voice, telling her nothing important, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. When she finally woke for good, she saw a man whose eyes held deep sadness but no threat. She stayed, at first, out of necessity. Then out of trust, and finally, out of love. Elias never raised his voice. Never touched her in anger. When nightmares woke her, shaking and breathless, he sat beside her until dawn without asking questions. When she spoke of fear, he listened. When she spoke of hope, he believed her. He didn't try to own her. He didn't try to shape her. He chose her, every day, and gave her the freedom to choose him back. Years passed. One summer, a boy from the valley went missing while hunting near the mountain ridge. Panic spread fast. Men searched for days with no success. Finally, someone suggested asking the mountain man. Elias listened quietly, then took his rifle and rope and disappeared into the high trails. He returned 2 days later with the boy alive, injured but breathing. He carried him all the way down the mountain. The valley saw Elias Crow differently after that. But it wasn't until the next winter, when illness swept through the town and supplies ran low, that they truly understood. Elias and Mara brought down dried meat, herbs, and blankets. Mara stayed to nurse the sick, her hands steady, her voice calm. Elias repaired roofs, chopped wood, and stood watch at night so others could rest. When someone finally asked Mara, gently this time, why did you choose him? She smiled. I didn't choose the mountain man, she said. I chose the man who carried me out of a storm when he had every reason to walk past. The pity disappeared then. In its place grew respect. And high above the valley, in a cabin surrounded by wind and stars, Mara and Elias continued their quiet life, one not built on ease, but on kindness, resilience, and a love strong enough to survive the cold.